Welcome to Being in Practice.
I'm Erin Davis. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a therapist.
I'm Dani Dwyer-Willingham. I use they, she pronouns, and I'm a quantum somatic coach. And we're a couple of queer, neurodivergent, multi-passionates here to get curious and unpack elements of collective and individual experiences through our intuitive, trauma-informed lenses.
We're both practitioners and people in our own constant discovery, here to provide education, entertainment, and an exploration on the practice of being, as messy and as multidimensional as it can be.
Let's be in practice together.
We're back.
Hey everybody, we're back. Welcome to Being in Practice.
We are definitely being today.
We are being. I'm before we get started.
Yep.
I'm Dani.
Oh, I'm Erin.
Erin.
Yes, again, here. Hi.
If you're just joining us, welcome. If you've been listening since we started, thanks for being here.
Yeah, welcome back.
Erin and I are having so many feels right now. We're recording this in Cancer season.
We are. You're a Cancer.
I'm a Cancer sun, along with many other placements, and we have been rolling through our feelings, but I think it's kind of a perfect place to launch from to talk about today's topic.
Mm-hmm. We're talking about shame today.
We're talking about shame.
We do a little bit wish it was the stress and burnout episode, but we have to wait for
That's
our
coming.
guest. It is coming. It is coming.
We're going to have a whole interview with an expert on overcoming shame. Wow, this is that episode.
Overcoming stress and burnout.
Thank you.
Yes, with my business coach. That's coming up. I'm really excited.
Yes, but this episode is about overcoming shame.
It is.
Overcoming is a big word. I think addressing shame, unlearning internalized shame. What are the antidotes to shame? Worthiness, embodiment, embracing of our truest selves.
What is shame?
What is shame? How does it live in our bodies?
Mm-hmm.
I think shame is such a collective experience because, at least speaking from our experience, we grew up not only in Western culture, which is, at the time we were growing up, parenting was still extremely shame-based. Also, definitely. Growing up in religious homes where shame is such an underlying component of indoctrination because we are shamed out of natural behaviors so that we don't perform them, so that we can fit into the boxes that religion prescribes. So we're going to be talking about all of that today. We think. Wild. We're actually just going to kind of see where this one goes.
Which I think we actually do every time. We do. It feels extra like, let's see what happens today.
We also very much trust that what comes through is exactly or will resonate with at least some of you. And
we're meant to say it for a reason.
Absolutely.
For a person, for some people.
That's where the intuitive, trauma-informed lens comes through. Erin hates when I do this.
What? I do? Apparently.
When I tie in the multi-dimensional.
Oh gosh, yes.
All of the things.
I love it. I mean, it's good consistency.
This is us being us.
So, Dani.
Erin.
What is shame?
What is shame?
I don't know. It's on here. I think it could be a lot of things. I feel like this definition is really tight, like small. The definition that it's good, but deep sense of personal inadequacy or unworthiness, often stemming from internalized negative beliefs or societal expectations. I mean, it's a good place to start.
Yeah.
It's a good place to start.
I think a good place to start with shame is the place that shame enters all of our lives, which is early childhood. Shame is often the first internalized experience we have about ourselves as babies. When we are shamed for doing a behavior that we don't know is quote unquote wrong and shamed for that, a young child's brain can't perceive that shame doesn't belong to them. They experience that as I am bad. Not I did something bad, but I am bad. Yeah. And I think as adults who are working so diligently to not only self-actualize, but help other people move through that process, I think understanding that we all experienced shame in childhood. We all probably still experience levels of shame in adulthood. And I think starting at the root of how that lives in our bodies, because it is so lifelong for most of us, I think is, if you're overwhelmed by shame, or if you feel like it inhibits the way that you feel like you can move through the world, addressing the roots, like where did it come from? What are the stories that your caregivers or the people who raised you laid onto you that you internalized as shame, or as that story, I am bad? Do they still show up for you? Does that inner narrative, I am bad, still play out for you? I think it's also so linked to capability. I am not capable of being good. I can't do anything. Those stories are all tied to the root of shame.
Yeah.
So if those are still playing in your narrative, in how you're telling yourself you move through the world, those are great questions to ask to start.
Definitely. Yeah. I think shame, like you're talking about it in like my therapy brain, therapy language is core beliefs, right? We all have these core beliefs of, whether we're aware of them or not, typically of shame. Like some of us have fostered or do have some positive core beliefs. Not all core beliefs have to be shame based, but in like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy language, that's a big thing that I've worked with several clients on. Not necessarily CBT exactly, but I like that language a lot that CBT provides with it. Because I think you're saying that that shame is the core belief, like the ultimate core belief that I'm bad. That's what we're just saying.
Shame creates that core belief, I am bad,
yes,
that can become tied to our overall identity.
Yeah, in language, in a core belief, like language way, that's how shame presents. But I feel like it also branches out. I've worked with a lot of clients too on like the core, like a shame core belief of like, I'm not enough. And then I'm not worthy. We're talking about worthiness today too. We'll get there, but I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. I'm bad. I'm too much. Those are a lot. And I don't think it really matters too much. Like it starts with I'm bad, and if it branches off in these other ways, listeners might be resonating a little bit more with, I feel like I'm bad, such an umbrella one, and maybe we would all, even at least consciously, if we're not aware or whatever, like I think I'm bad feels a little less relatable, like for my experience, I'm thinking, and even my clients' experiences that I've worked with. I'm stupid, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I'm too much. Yep. Those are really common ones that I see. Like, and it's all stemming from they're still related to I'm bad, but
I think it's like, if we think about it in the layers of development, it's like shame is here held by the child. It becomes I am bad because that's the language that the child has at that time.
Definitely.
And then it becomes all of these other branches of perceptions of shame, which are I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm stupid, I can't do anything. That can really color a person's experience. I know it has mine.
Definitely.
Those stories, rewiring those into the converse, which we're going to talk about. I am worthy. I am enough. I can do this. I am capable. Imagine.
I think it's really hard. Oh my gosh. I just did like a marathon of therapy sessions yesterday after coming off of a trip of camping and being out of service. So this is coming up a lot this week, which is really interesting. That I think it's really hard to, even for listeners, for my clients, for myself, to go from here's these negative core beliefs I have. We all have at least a couple that have branched off. I wouldn't say there's typically just one. But it's really hard if you're working on this, if you want to like let go of these beliefs. Maybe you're aware you have them, maybe you aren't, but either way, you want to feel better. You don't want these ruling your life or playing any role in how you're living your life anymore. It's hard to go from that to the opposite. And that's the ideal. Like that's kind of what you're saying, I think. It's the ideal to get to a point where we can recondition, decondition, unlearn, relearn that we are worthy, that we're enough, that we're smart and capable, whatever the opposite is. But that's such a huge jump. And I can't, it's like an interesting workaround that I see with my clients where as a like working with them, I can't just be like I mean it doesn't really work, and it's not this, I mean it's not really this simple to just be like, okay, we're going to believe
you are enough.
You're going to start saying that, and it feels it lands so, I know it lands so flat to them.
Absolutely.
And I know that because it lands flat for me, like just to all of a sudden, you know, let's figure out what your beliefs are, like the branch off ones. Let's work on them by doing the opposite. That's not bad advice. And I'm not saying that you're even saying that, but I think the middle ground, this is something I just read in a book. I'm really excited about this book. I just started it, so I can't recommend it for sure, but it's called, oh my goodness, it's called something, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yes.
I watched the documentary. Now I'm reading the book. But I think it's in this book, he's quoting someone, I'll have to look at it later. But that I think the middle ground here is finding acceptance, almost maybe, in the shame part, so that we can, like, I always forget this word, it's not transmute, but like transform the belief through acceptance into feeling the new belief of worthiness or enoughness. He says in this book, the rejection of the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of a positive experience, a positive feeling, is in and of itself a negative experience. And the acceptance of a negative experience is in of itself a positive experience. And I think it's really beautiful. And I think that's that middle ground. If you're wanting to work on this, I do think an easier route, simple, not easy, maybe that's better, a simpler route would be through acceptance. I don't know what you think about that, though.
Yeah, no, I think the converse of shame being these other things that people would perceive as better, right? I am enough, I am worthy.
A better belief.
A better belief. I mean, which they are, in the sense that they help inform freer ways of being, right? I think this brings up so much for me. As you said, the simple route, although not easy, I think it can seem like such a stretch, and absolutely has for me in my life, to go from feeling like such an unworthy, unwhole person to being like, how could I ever feel whole and worthy?
It's a big gap.
And I think that brings us into this middle ground, which is understanding that shame is internalized, which means that it lives in our body, which means that simply saying, this is kind of like the top-down causation of, you can say it all you want, but it's going to land flat, most likely. It's going to feel fake. This is why
embodying it.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is why affirmations can be so tough for people to wrap their minds around, because it is mental. They are words. Language can only do so much for processing these core beliefs, these core suppressions that we have, and these experiences that our bodies hold and that inform how, like, all of our behavior, because our behavior moves through our body. So I think going into this, and this is also something I like that was coming up for me today as I was thinking about this episode, is how shame is so attached to perfectionism. And you said self-acceptance, or you said kind of the path is acceptance. And one of the most pivotal books that I've ever read, and this was so many years ago now, and this is an older book, but it's called Overcoming Perfection. And I think the subtitle is Finding the Key to Balance and Self-Acceptance. And it's by Ann W. Smith. I think I have that correct. It is so much about overcoming shame and perfectionism through acceptance of who we actually are, through understanding the beauty that just is our own existence. But I think it's baby steps. I think the trauma-informed perspective would be to tell someone who actually believes that they are not enough, that they are enough, is squashing their belief. It's invalidating that belief.
Ooh, I like this. Yes.
So
that's also why
first,
it doesn't work.
that's absolutely. And I think that's why so many people feel so daunted by this quote unquote task of overcoming shame.
Well, because too, if you're, like you're saying, an outside person telling someone either just believe you're worthy, or the route is that the truth is that you're worthy, any of that language, we do that to ourselves too. So it's like gaslighting, invalidating of self. If you're believing you suck or whatever, then saying to yourself, I'm worthy is you're saying, like, hearing that from outside's invalidating, hearing that from inside's invalidating.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also why it doesn't work. So many reasons.
I feel like we're almost kind of creating this framework now, which is like core belief is shame. I am not enough, whatever that story is for you. And then it's validating that part of you.
Acceptance.
Validating that part of you that actually believes that, or at least thinks they still believe that. And then we're moving into acceptance that we have to validate that core belief, right? And then from that place of acceptance, we can begin to change the belief. We can begin to change the behavior attached to that belief. And I think, again, coming back to acknowledging that it's internalized, I think this is where I was even just feeling into myself, like the body language that is associated with shame is often hunching, it's withdrawal, it's crossing arms, it's really making ourselves small. Yeah. So even doing somatic work there's, all of those like positive mindset people who are like, just go in a bathroom and stand with your arms open wide,
Yeah. Wear your stance.
But it can be that, I think, in moments, and this is like in titration, right? Which is introducing things in small ways so that they are digestible, especially for a traumatized brain and or a traumatized body, is in small moments, in those tiny moments when you feel maybe that belief, I'm not enough. What can you do in your body to tell yourself to validate that, to accept that, and then to expand from that? Maybe it's touching, maybe it's bringing hands across chest, maybe it's opening up, maybe it's just like finding alignment in the neck. There's so many ways, I think, that are really small that we can bring into those maybe micro experiences of shame as we're trying to rewire the bigger monster of shame.
Yeah, bringing somatics into it. I mean, we are a body, we are a mind, so bringing all of those ways into like kind of that healing process, the reorganizing process would be really good. I was just thinking about like our little step ladder of like shame, validation, acceptance, and then ultimately new belief, maybe. But I don't know.
What's in between? How do we go from here?
Well, I don't have an answer to that right this second. But my thought is, I'm wondering now, too, after this discussion, if a new belief, if the goal is to have, if the true goal is to have a new core belief, a positive one, I'm wondering, I don't know, I'm thinking about how in my experience, at least my experience, it does feel like you're doing this a lot, right? Like one hand, I'm motioning like a hand down and a hand up, right? So like opposite poles of an experience. But life is so much, and we are so much in the gray, that maybe the goal being a positive core belief is feeding into that idea of black and white thinking, of perfectionism. Like, right, if I can't embody or believe that I'm worthy, or if that still doesn't feel true, even if I've done my work, or maybe any other reason, that maybe acceptance of self, when we stop only believing this negative core belief, we can get to the point where we can see that we are both, I mean, we encompass good and bad. I think of like the yin and yang, and the balance of like life, there's seasons, it's not all good and it's not all bad, and that's how we are too. That might be a loftier goal, but
well, I mean, I think you're pointing out an important perspective, which is absolutely one that I ascribe to, which is life outside of polarity, life outside of the binary. I think even the labels of good and bad, positive and negative, to me induce shame, because I'm like, oh, so much of what I do isn't quote unquote good or isn't quote unquote positive. And I think even for myself and in my practice, unlabeling emotions as positive, negative, good, bad has been really freeing for myself, for my clients.
Definitely.
Because I think emotions can be experienced through a shame-based lens. feeling.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Let's talk. It's like boys don't cry. That can be perceived like that becomes internalized shame. So that coloring, that narrative of crying is bad, therefore I must not feel, therefore I must numb out all emotions, leads to this kind of cloyed way of living.
That's a terrible word.
Through shame.
Yeah.
But I think that,
and or dissociation because of shame.
Well, and I think that's
to that point.
That's the broader, I think internalized shame can ultimately lead to severe, I mean, some of the more prominent ones are addiction, mental health issues, severe somatic complications, and
it has to come out somewhere.
Absolutely. So yeah,
I mean, we've just been talking about the goal being this thing, but now we're reworking it that I don't think we should say having a positive core belief is not something to maybe work towards or want, but I also don't think it's the whole thing.
I think that it's the expectation or the goal of having a positive core belief could be overwhelming. And I think I believe that everyone innately deserves to feel their own worthiness.
Agreed.
I believe that everyone deserves to feel their own wholeness. So for me as a practitioner, of course, that is something I would aspire to support my clients in experiencing, is their own wholeness, is their enoughness, is a way of moving through the world that they feel like they have capacity and capability to do the things that they want to do in the ways they want to do them. So for me, I'm like, everyone deserves that. I want that for everybody. But maybe unlabeling the goal is where we take it back to now. So where would you start with somebody saying, coming into your, your practice, saying, I feel like I can't. I don't feel like I'm enough. I don't feel like my dreams are worthy. Where do you start? What's your step ladder? And again, we're saying step ladder, but our experience as humans, as you pointed out so beautifully, is that it's so sporadic. We're always up and down. We might hit pockets of shame as we move through. So how do we address that root so that we're not constantly spiraling into pockets of shame? That's a lot of questions for you.
I mean, well, I feel like it's hard to answer that in a way that feels like good, because everybody, like you just said, is so unique, and I would have a lot more questions for somebody. I would want to dig into, like you kind of said at the beginning of this, right? Where's this coming from? Do you know? What's your, what is this quote unquote evidence that you've built up? Like, what are these experiences that you've gathered as evidence for this being your truth, for this being how you're living your life?
But I think that's the gold. I think that's like
it.
That's it, right? Getting to the core, getting to the root is one of, to me, the most important aspects to self-discovery.
I agree. I know for some of my clients, lots of people I've worked with, lots of people I know, like sometimes we don't have access to, for lots of reasons, not even because people have blacked out or can't remember. Like sometimes we don't know.
Oh,
why?
I think to clarify, I'm not talking about getting to core memory. I think I'm talking about getting to core feeling.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Because I think this is important to address, because I completely understand what you were saying, which is we absolutely do not have to remember our trauma to heal from it. Point blank, if somebody's telling you need to relive your trauma to heal that trauma, please run. That is not a safe. Please come talk to us. That is so antithesis of what true embodied trauma-informed healing is about. So absolutely, you don't need to remember your parents shaming you to heal from the shame that lives in our bodies.
Yeah, I do think though, I guess to keep answering would be, after digging, would be to go to, I don't know, like I'm just really curious about this new thought about accepting a negative experience or belief as a positive experience, because I'm wondering if part of not wanting to have this core belief anymore, it's a form of rejection or working against.
Yeah.
And in that's a negative experience. And not that we have to accept, I don't know, I'm just really curious about this concept. Not that we have to accept, it's not even saying I believe, maybe it is saying I believe I'm not enough, and then seeing how that feels in your body, in your experience, maybe playing with it. I know that I was really working on some shame around money when we first started recording earlier this year. I was really, really working on, I was very dysregulated. Some stuff with money came up, and I remember talking to my therapist about how I was like, maybe I think one of my core beliefs was that I'm bad with money, and that's something I've been working on. But I remember having a session with my therapist about it, and we talked about I was like, why am I fighting this? I just need to accept that I'm bad with money. And I don't even think it's true, but I'm also no longer fighting it, and things have felt a lot better. And I don't think the point for me in this experience was to prove that I'm good with money, or to even have the core belief that I am good with money. Maybe that's it, maybe it isn't, but that hasn't been what's evolved for me. What's evolved for me through that experience is that I'm now regulated, and I can now do what I want and start to heal this thing.
Yeah.
And it's not even that I believe I'm good with money. I just believe that I'm bad with money. I've accepted that I believe that I'm bad with money, and now I'm regulated. And the point before was I was so dysregulated. I was barely present with you. I was barely present in my relationships. I was very sad. It was just a hard time. Anyway, so that's what I'm thinking. I would do with clients.
I think you're filling in some of the blanks for me as you're talking, because you talked about going from acceptance into regulation. And I think then going from regulation into integration is a key component, because you're talking about this changing this quote unquote negative belief into a quote unquote positive belief. That's that's a big circuitous chunk of, and that's not really how humans work, right? And regulation is key, integration is key. And I think what I mean by that is we are humans that are conglomerations of our lived experience, of our intergenerational DNA, of so many things that influence how we show up in the world, right? And part of the integration process is when we regulate, which is when we learn how to move through a situation or into a topic. So for that for you in that experience would have been talking about money, budgeting, doing things related to money. When we are able to learn how to regulate in those circumstances that previously would have been activating for our nervous systems, then we can learn to integrate by releasing the parts or the ways that we've interacted with those circumstances that no longer serve us.
Exactly.
We can only do that by identifying them as well. So that's where it's the acceptance, the regulation, and then kind of identifying in order to release, to then integrate. What are the things that you already do in other parts of your life that are amazing, that could serve you in the ways that you work around money? That acceptance of, I am bad with money. Now you can release the parts of that for you that weren't serving you and become more free, as you said. So we're kind of building this spiral. We'll call it a spiral staircase of
steps.
Yeah, moving from the threads of shame that can influence everything. Money, relationships, sex. I mean, shame and sex, that's a whole other episode.
That's a freaking big one. That's a whopper.
That's a lifetime career right there.
Yeah.
Shame can color everything. So I think using these also, I think acknowledging that this process of unlearning shame is a lifetime process. There is not a quick fix for any of this.
Yeah.
And there is a path forward. There are ways to address these things and to rewire them for ourselves in ways that feel safe and effective and gentle and like they improve our free way of being.
I love it. I do think we're onto something here. I think the key, I want listeners to, to hear, like, I'm going to rewind a little bit, that I think for me, the first step, like if you go to a therapist or not about this, if you just are like wanting to try something on your own, the step for me, and I said it earlier, but I've never put it that way out loud before, so I'm going to say it again, is that I accepted that I believed I was bad with money.
Not that you were.
Yes.
So
it's like, it's a step removed, but it'll still allowed for acceptance, and then everything else came into place, like you said.
Can you say that again with kind of the core belief of like, I am not enough? So I accepted
that I believed that I
am not enough.
Or that I'm bad. I think if you want to try this, like, this is something you can do on your own.
A great journaling exercise.
Because I'm thinking about it right now, I think that accepting that you believe something, like that's that validation, right? That's that internal validation, that self-validation. Additionally, a lot more accessible and embodied to do that versus, let's just say I'm worthy. Let's just start incorporating that into my thoughts. Every time I know this, I've worked with some people that either I've had them try it, but it doesn't typically work, of like we said, of like saying the opposite. Every time you have that thought, try and bring the opposite thought to your mind. And sometimes that works. And I think that we can work on that in other ways, maybe a little later down the line. But first is this. And I think it's a lot more accessible and a lot more validating and going to get you a bit farther.
Absolutely.
Because that, right, the acceptance of a negative experience or thought or emotion is in of itself a positive. Again, not that that's the most, positive, negative, whatever, but I just really like it a lot.
I think
beautiful.
Yeah. I'll have to think more about what I want to call these things labeled as positive and negative, because again, for me, that's very shame inducing. Not that you're inducing my shame, but when I think of things in those binary labels, especially because as a child, if I was good, I was safe. And if I was bad, I was not safe. So for me, good and bad are so convoluted.
That is, interesting.
Yeah. So I'll have to think about what I'd like to call those experiences.
Whole, complete.
Yeah.
Freeing. More embodied, more regulated. These are regulating experiences.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Regulating experiences. I love that. I love the stepping out of dysregulating beliefs and dysregulating experiences into regulated beliefs and regulating experiences.
Boom. We solved it.
High five, Erin. So let's talk about some of these regulating experiences, because I know we wanted to talk about some of the more whole antidotes or regulating experiences to shame, which are enoughness, are worthiness. That's not where we start. You're not, if you're on a journey of unlearning shame, you're not, like we said earlier, you're not going to start by just pounding it into your mind. I am enough. I am enough. It's not most likely not going to be so effective, and it's certainly not going to meet yourself where you're at.
That being said, I do want to caveat this, which is going to sound counterintuitive or maybe even countering what we're saying, but I do believe every single person is enough because they are. So so that's been said. So that our listeners hear that you are enough because you are. You are worthy because you are. Like, period. The sentence ends there.
Absolutely.
We all are. I am. Whether we can embody that or not, like, I so deeply know, even if I don't embody it all the time, that is the truth.
Yes. the truth is that we are
however
all
you are,
worthy.
whatever you're struggling with, whatever you would say is bad about you or good about you, like it's all enough. It is.
You are enough. Yeah, period. Like you said.
You're worthy because you are.
You are worthy because you are.
Anyway,
Absolutely.
So caveat that with, you don't have to believe me. Listeners, you don't have to believe me right now. I don't always believe me for myself.
But I believe it is an innate right.
True.
It is an innate right, and it is an innate truth of existence that we are all whole and worthy and enough. Actually internalizing that, actually embodying that perspective could be a lifelong journey, and it might never happen because of the ways in which we live in a place, in a world that is so heavily affected by societal conditioning, by things telling you that you're not enough all of the time, like capitalism, like productivity mindset, like all of these things that
many things
are constantly inflicted on our existence, that we are not doing enough. So I think learning into enoughness, that is anti-capitalist by nature. That is anti-patriarchy by nature. Absolutely. And that is big work. And it is also, I think we've talked about this in other episodes, like it's almost like queering the way we live, because it's so cool. It is, I love our brains. It is.
Me too.
It is outside of cultural norms to experience enoughness. Period.
Well, I also think for listeners, I just want to clarify, like, this worthiness, this enough,ness, we're kind of moving into that topic more specifically, that ultimate truth, like this enoughness that you and I are talking about, this innate worthiness that you and I are talking about, it is wholly and only and 100%, all the words, divorced from perfection. So I think for listeners, I could imagine a listener listening to us talk about this now, this innate worthiness and enoughness, like, and think, well, I think, and for a lot of my clients too that I worked with, like, it feels unattainable, it feels impossible, it feels so distant to get to enoughness because there's all these stipulations to get to enoughness. But that's what I like about the phrase we just said, and what I wanted to clarify. You're enough, right? You're enough because you are, you're worthy because you are, period, means, to break it down, that in your imperfections and the stage of growth you're in the badness with money, like, position that you might actually be in or not, whatever, but it is divorced from perfection. So I just wanted to really clarify that.
Absolutely. And I think even just you saying your badness with money, I think this is where words and language can be really powerful, because instead of saying, you can accept that you believe that you are bad with money.
Yes.
And instead of saying, I am bad with money, I have not learned to be responsible with money yet. I have not learned to be embodied.
Or I am learning.
And I am learning. I am learning to be embodied during sex. I am learning to live shame-free with my eating habits, with my food. I mean, as people recovered from disordered eating, that's been a huge one for me. I just wrote a post about it last night.
Oh, yeah.
How intuitive eating and rewiring a shame-based mindset around food that was internalized so young in childhood has been so liberating, but is also, again, like a 15 to 20 year process that I've been in. So underlining and highlighting that the ways in which, as we're calling them, these shame threads influence our lives, or like pulling those all back in the ways that they have rooted into our lives that we've created for ourselves, that in and of itself is a huge and monumental task. And then reseeding these, as we've called them, regulated beliefs of worthiness, of enoughness, that, and then growing that garden, also radical, monumental, queer as fuck.
And brave and amazing. And for anyone that's in this process, like, props. I mean, I would hope we all are, doing that for ourselves, because it feels so good, and as hard as it is.
What's coming up for me is just like the fact that we, as a generation of people, and younger generations as well, and I mean anyone living on earth, like, we have the opportunity to do this maybe for the first time in our lineages, maybe for the first time in human existence that we can remember, that our bodies remember. So I truly believe that healing shame and healing the aspects of shame in our lives is intergenerational healing. I believe that it is creating a future that I want for my child. I believe that it is creating a future that I want for future generations, because an existence free of shame is an existence of enoughness. When we perceive ourselves as enough, we're not competing. We're not in competition with other people. Imagine a world where we were out of competition, out of power dynamics. Worthiness and enoughness is the opposite of power over, is the opposite of colonialism, is the opposite of patriarchy. This is like, I feel like I want to talk about this forever, and we'll probably have a lot more podcasts about it.
I also love that we didn't want to record today.
Erin and I almost didn't do this because we were both...
I told you we needed to.
I was so womp womp.
I know. Me too.
But we are living examples that embracing ourselves where we are.
That's what I'm saying today. I know.
Accepting where we are, and then moving into regulating experiences. Hello, this recording is a regulating experience.
Totally.
Erin and I are co-regulating in real time.
Yeah. It's cool.
This is amazing. This is magic.
Is it psychedelic?
It is psychosomatic for sure. And for anyone who...
It feels psychedelic to me.
It does feel a little psychedelic. But psychosomatic is one of my favorite misunderstood words because...
Let's hear it. I don't even know if I know what it is.
Oh my goodness. Really psychosomatic is often used incorrectly as something that you perceive to be true. So like a psychosomatic sickness was like, oh, they think they're sick, so they are.
Yes, that's how I've heard it.
Actually means that it is our brain experiencing existence through our bodies. So for instance, if I have a pain in my back, I believe I like experience that as a wiring, as a firing in my brain. That is a psychosomatic experience. So kind of anything we do that is mind-body related, mind-body connection, is a psychosomatic experience.
That everything?
Pretty much. That's why I love it.
Yeah. I do feel more
shame
regulated.
Is a psychosomatic experience. We believe, so we feel, so we behave.
CBT.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all of the theories.
CBT,
honestly,
which Erin keeps saying is
the
cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a systematic framework in therapy to unlearn cognitive
beliefs,
wiring.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is super powerful. And also, as we're experiencing right now, co-regulating through shame is...
Well, and that's
vital.
That's what Brene Brown talks in her work on shame. It's not the antidote, I guess it's the antidote. The kryptonite to shame is vulnerability. And we're approaching that.
Yeah.
In what you're saying.
I was curious if we were going to bring up Brene Brown today because she is the world's most well-known shame researcher. I think she also can be a little controversial in the sense that she doesn't really address systemic oppression.
Agreed.
Or any of the real world influences that a lot of people who have internalized shame deal with. So I'm glad we're talking about it, actually. There's some holes, there's some gaps.
There's also some good research that's come out of it.
Absolutely. Her books have...
helping the world.
Yes, her books have helped a lot of people.
But not
only her books, her work, her body of work, her life's work. So we honor you, Brene Brown, for what you've done for the world. And we also,
would love it if you included some more
dynamic and marginalized perspectives in your work.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But that's what you're saying.
And that's what we're here for.
Vulnerability. That's another step, right? Like sharing your core belief. That could be another step on our little spiral staircase. Whether that's with a therapist, with a trusted friend. I know that in my money journey, coach, in my money journey, that I did talk to several people, and it wasn't the end all be all. None of these things are the end all be all fix all solutions. Yeah, so talking to other people was really, really helpful. again, coach, therapist, trusted friends, all of the
processor,
above.
a safe processor.
Yeah, all of the above. Someone that can hold space for you to have the shame without invalidating you or gaslighting you or any of that stuff we've already kind of discussed.
I think the holding space piece is key and also ties back into the co-regulation. So to externalize, to bring things through our bodies requires that we are able to do that in a way that is safe to fully and efficiently process those things. So maybe it leads back to this, as we said earlier, like I can't cry, I can't feel my feelings. To learn how to safely and efficiently and like in your own way process emotions is vital to unlearning shame, is vital to learning worthiness, and also highly encourage anyone who maybe feels a block around experiencing your emotions in a safe way or even in a full way to seek safe support for that. Because I think when, at least for me, and this is another episode we'll have for sure, but shame and guilt go hand in hand. I used to feel, again, because of the labels of good and bad, like I couldn't feel anger. I had a lot of guilt around feeling anger and the sadness that was tied to that anger. So finding a safe and effective way to process through those feelings with someone who's able to safely hold that container and able to safely co-regulate with you through validation and also giving you the space to learn how to self-express, I think is vital in this process of unlearning shame, healing into worthiness, doing all of these this big work of actually rewiring shame in our bodies and in our existences.
Yeah, I love it. I'm feeling so emotional. I'm so like happy that we're doing this.
I feel like our hearts are so connected right now.
Yeah.
I hope that everyone listening, and we have the video on YouTube and Spotify, but for everyone listening, I hope that this resonates in a way that like it's resonating for Erin and I right now, because that is our highest goal, I think, with this podcast. It's one of my highest joys, and why I do the work that I do is because this experience of co-regulation and of heart connection is something that I like wish for everyone.
Yeah, and I think that's why I was feeling emotional, because I was just thinking about all the people we're helping, or that I hope we're helping, that we're touching, that are like, I mean, there's people that are listening that have never considered the things we're talking about. I know that. Actually, my partner told me about someone that is listening and just heard our first episode only and is already like, I've never thought about this, or I don't know, lots of things, but it's just really cool.
Yeah. So if these ways of being, if these perspectives are new for you, we're so thankful that we are able to bring them to you. If this is old news and you've been doing this kind of unlearning for a long time, we hope that even if it doesn't add anything new necessarily, that it helps you understand that you're not alone in this work, that there are people and professionals out there truly with the highest goal of supporting others, ourselves, our families, our communities, and the collective, our clients, with learning how to be the most whole, most free, most embodied, most worthy versions of yourselves, of ourselves.
Yeah. And I think for those people, I would say as well that maybe this is a refresher, a reminder, repeat, whatever. We all need those. So I hope you're still taking something either new or just, what you and me are talking about this today. These aren't incredibly new thoughts, I don't think, for either of us. And it's still so nice to talk about it again and experience this connection, this moment, but also like remembering, oh yeah, like even like talking about the experience I had with money, right? Like all these things are just reminders, but it's really good to be here and remember.
I think this word remember is so important. For me, it's like split, like remember. Remembering our wholeness is like that final integration piece.
Like remembering.
Our bodies remember what it feels like to be whole, even if that was literally in infancy.
Agreed.
Our brains and our energetic fields know what it's like to be whole. We've got to help ourselves remember our wholeness.
And sometimes remembering wholeness can feel triggering. It can feel like an existential crisis. It can feel like dread and threat because you haven't done it before. But that's okay. That's when you definitely recommend a professional in that scenario. But it's scary doing something new, learning something new about yourself, stepping into your authenticity. We've talked about authenticity. Like all this these are big steps. Wholeness is scary, even if we do remember it. But it's so different. I don't know. I know I've had those experiences of letting go. I mean, if it's a core belief and we're trying to have people let go of that, even if we're not, especially if we're not aspiring to a new core belief to like attach onto, because again, it's just another form of identity and a false sense of security. This is who I am. I'm bad. This is who I am. I'm good. Like, those are both false senses of security.
That's the principle of attachment being the root of all suffering, which is another episode we'll have.
But it's scary to like, I know for some listeners, it could sound like, yeah, that sounds great. And then you start practicing this or working with someone, it might be a little scary, but having that safe container to come back to, a professional, trusted friends is really important.
Yeah. And we talk about this a lot. I think we've ended most episodes being like, if you need support with this, find a trusted professional. But we've, I think, laid out a lot of really beautiful questions and prompts for folks maybe to take away from this today. And also, if the whole framework is something you're interested in, I would say absolutely seek support, seek a safe processor, and understand and give yourself the grace that this is the work of a lifetime, the work of maybe many, depending on what you believe.
I know we're almost out of time. I don't know if I should ask this question.
Ask it.
I'm curious. I want it brief because we're coming up on time. But I'm curious how you got to the point where all of this that we've talked about, and is resonating with you. And, this is, like I said, this isn't all new information to us. I wouldn't say that we're sitting here like discovering for the first time all these truths that we've shared with each other. So I'm curious I want to share what brought me here, but I want to hear how you got here because I think they're going to be very different answers. And if you can make it brief, obviously.
I will. I think the thing that's coming up for me is literally it's just been an unlearning process.
Through what though? What have been your modalities? Yoga, therapy?
So my modalities are what I'm trained in now. I mean, I think I started with energy work. I moved into hypnotherapy. Then I moved into...
For yourself as a participant.
And I studied hypnotherapy.
Yeah. Okay.
So both. I, as an energy medicine practitioner, have learned to have a wider understanding of the universal support that I have. That has helped me understand my wholeness. Honestly, it's influenced by every aspect of every training that I've done as an integrative wellness and life coach, as a somatics practitioner, as a trauma-informed practitioner.
Did you have a therapist?
Oh, I've been in therapy for 15 years.
Yeah, maybe traditional therapy as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So a lot, but it's multifaceted.
It is so multifaceted. Yeah. And aside from the therapy component, I do all of those things now in my practice.
Yeah.
So I will always say I am my own first client. So when I bump up against shame things, I go back to my toolbox of what I would share with a client experiencing the same thing.
Totally.
And find a safe processor or do it on my own.
Yeah.
Of where is this living in my body? How do I unlearn this? How do I release it? Literally get it out of my body. And how do I integrate so that I am whole and move forward with that understanding and that actual belief and knowing that I am whole.
That makes sense. I was just going to share, therapy's been really big. I would say too, all of my social work experiences have been a part of that as well. even in the agency work I was doing. But I would say most of it for me has been probably like psychedelic experiences, and I've done only those experiences very intentionally. Not that there's a wrong way to do them, but that's how I've used them to grow, heal, change. And I think a lot of life experiences plus that has given me a lot of wisdom. And I would say too, like, yeah, I view my therapy practice as a very spiritual, like doing therapy is a very spiritual practice for me. And I feel like I grow just as much as my clients. It feels like a hack on life almost to like be on this end of like the healing, support process. Being a healer, I guess I'll say that, or whatever, being in the healing field is, I just feel like a life hack of like a plethora of wisdom. And
I think if we take advantage of it, which I know we both do, as we're supporting other people, we are also able to self-reflect and grow because of the learning that comes. People are amazing. I love learning from my clients. I learn so much. So thank you to everyone who supports Erin and I by being our clients in our own healing journeys.
That's so funny. Thanks, clients, if you're listening.
But it's reciprocity in relationship. It's that ethical understanding of what it means to be in a reciprocal healing relationship with people as a practitioner.
Totally.
As you give, so we receive. That is one of the energetic fundamental principles.
I love it.
So
yeah. Cool. I was just curious about that. I think that's a good place to
little anecdote conclude, for you.
What our experiences of getting here have at least somewhat entailed.
And I think it's again, it's constant.
Totally.
Unlearning
We're
shame,
still in process.
Rewiring.
We're still
those threads. We are still beings in process. Being in practice.
Yep. Better being.
Prismatic being.
All the beings.
Thank you all for being here with us today. We hope that this conversation about shame and worthiness and relearning and unlearning has served you in some ways, and we're so looking forward to having you back next time. Yeah, we're so grateful.
Thanks all.
All right.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.